Welcome to the Branding Room Only podcast, where we share career stories, strategies, and lessons learned on how industry leaders and influencers have built their personal brands. Now, let's get started with the show. Hi, everyone. It's Paula, your host of Branding Room Only. So excited for my conversation today with Jerry One. Jerry is the founder of World Class Speakers, Asian Creator Awards, and the creator of Dear Asian American podcast. He is a keynote speaker and coach who's worked with some of the world's leading brands like Google, JP Morgan, Harvard Business School, and the White House. His mission is to make everyone feel seen and heard through stories told on stages and to inspire them to take their own stages. So you know I'm ready to have this conversation. Jerry, welcome to the Branding Room.
Thank you, Paula. Really glad to be here. And thank you for creating a platform for all of us to share our stories and to build not only powerful, but profitable brands centered on our own stories.
Oh, yes, I love that. So let's jump right in. So this podcast is about personal branding. What does personal branding mean to you? How would you define it?
Yeah, it's what people say about you, right? And I think if we think about as children, or as through life, starting with when we were children, you know, other people tell our stories, right? Of course, it's our parents and our family who tell us how we behave, and you know, and even so, we're so young, we don't even have our own memory, right? That then translates to our teachers and our caretakers, our coaches that say, oh, you know, Paula's a great swimmer and Jerry's a great, you know, gymnast or whatever it is, and then we get stories told about us, and then the reputation builds, right? And so. At some point, I think people realize, hey, when do I get to have people think about me in the ways that I want? And, you know, and if you think about that, we go through schooling, we go through counselors, we go through admissions people, and we get to, you know, college and beyond, and we get to recruiters and managers and promotion committees. And many of us, too many of us, unfortunately, go through lives, our entire lives, having other people dictate only not what we are known for, but the value that's attached to what we are known for. And I think pre-internet, let's just call the internet one big giant bubble, pre-internet, that was more acceptable, right? Because there was really no pathway. But with the advent of the internet and platforms, you know, that we know and use, like LinkedIn, email, podcast, you know, we can really shape how people think about us, what we are known for, and then ultimately in the sense of, you know, building a business or even advancing in your own traditional career, how we get rewarded for those things. And so personal branding, I know, you know, it's a fancy buzzword and people describe it in different ways, but for me, it's what do people know you for and what are people willing to give you money for? And you own that narrative.
I love that. I love that. Everybody listening right now, make sure that's a clip. Okay. So all right. That being said, in 3 words or phrases, how would you describe yourself and essentially what your brand is? What are you known for?
Yeah, you know, it's been a long journey, right? And so I am a storyteller, I am an empowerer, and I'm a builder. And so again, I think I followed a lot of the scripts that were told to me, right? And so I was born in Korea, came to the States when I was 8, and you know, shout out to all of our parents who did what they did and who did what they had to with limited information and in the best of their ability to craft a better life for us. And then what parent doesn't, right? But I think with the acceleration of technology and with the changes that immigrating to a new country does without the understanding of how things work, we were told a very specific version of success, right? Which is study hard, focus on academics. We did clubs and sports only so that it would look good on a college app, but not to really exceed at it, right? It was just sort of, you know, how do we get to the next level? And because in many cultures, and particularly in Korea, it was very sequential, right? You do this, you get to the next one. After you do that, you get to the next one. And I don't think that my parents and many immigrant parents or many parents from marginalized backgrounds understand that that's not how America, and particularly corporate America, rewards its people, right? And so what we value things like collectivism and being humble and putting the team before me are things that are not necessarily rewarded. Right. And again, I'm generalizing here. And so you might say, well, I have this story. That's fine. I'm talking about how it is for most people, right? And the data backs this up. And so why I share all this is that I don't think that many of us went through our lives understanding that our stories and our experiences and our perspectives had material value.
Mm.
We were told to suppress it. We were told to be a different person from 9 to 5, and then you can be yourself on the weekend. But when you
Yes.
go to work, you be somebody else. You be the person that they want you to be, that they expect you to be. And that was also, in my opinion, reinforced because that's what was rewarded, right?
Mhm.
And so words like assimilation or acceptance or belonging, all these things come into play, right? And so it took me a long time. It took me about 20 years of navigating through different parts of corporate America, went to graduate school, did all the things that you're quote unquote supposed to do.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, I realized, hey, what's the one thing that I haven't tried, which was to bet on myself and to
Mm.
center and anchor my story and the stories of other people who look like me
Mhm.
into both building something that was meaningful, but also marketable, right? And so I grew up a lot thinking that leadership looked a certain way. I
Mm.
grew up a lot thinking that leadership was a objective definition, right? Because that's what we were taught.
Yes.
And so, and then one day you realize that, like, hey, all the things that you were taught about leadership were both devised and taught and reinforced by people who have no idea what my life is like
Yeah. And
as
who
an immigrant
don't look
kid.
like
And
you, who have
no,
not.
that don't look like me,
Right.
right? And look, I accept my privilege, right? I am a
Yeah.
educated East Asian straight-born man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am one thing away from the most privileged in this country. It's a
Mhm.
big thing, but it's one identity piece, right? And then we look at you, and we look at my wife, we look at
Yeah.
other friends, and if you at the intersectionality and the intersection of all the different marginalized entities,
Yeah.
you fall farther and further down the privilege scale, right?
Mhm.
That America brings to you. And so it's, to me, it's about understanding that,
Yeah.
and then understanding that while we can mope about that, which is understand, you can mope for a little bit,
Right.
and get sad, but
Right.
you also then have to, on the same side of the coin, understand that is so much empowerment in that,
Mhm.
because
And-
there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people that look
Mhm.
like you, that
Mhm.
look like me,
Mhm.
that need to hear the story from you, that have to hear the story from me,
Mhm.
because just like the advice that I was taking for myself in determining what corporate success looked like, what entrepreneurial success looked like, what life success looked like, the advice was tone deaf, right? Because while the content might have been good, Paula, I think what it totally missed was context, right? And
Mm.
so when somebody, so here's a phrase a lot of, authors and speakers, they say, if I can do it, you can do it.
So can you.
And I say, okay, but I'm not a 6'5" tall white guy. And that matters in this country, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, this is not an attack against other people, but it is to understand that the source of the information has to be considered when you take the information to heart. And so I can say the same thing
Yeah.
to Black women, and they'll
Yeah.
say, what do you know, dude? You don't know my life, which is fine. And I don't know your life.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Therefore, I
Yeah.
go to rooms and I know that I resonate in rooms with people that understand my background.
Yeah.
And you resonate with people with your background.
Yeah.
And it's not, there's this wonderful, wonderful clip. It's an interview with Denzel Washington, right? And I think many people have seen this, right? It's made its way around the internet.
Uh-huh.
And he talks about this need for specific people from specific backgrounds to direct specific films.
Mhm.
And the question was asked, like, did it have to be that a Black director like you made this movie? And he goes, it's not about color, but it's about culture. Right. And he brought up parallel examples of how it had to be Steven Spielberg that made Schindler's List, and it had to be Martin Scorsese that made Goodfellas.
Interesting.
Because it's not about who you are, it's about how you understand that perspective. Right. And so the empowerment piece for me comes from then letting other people know this. It's not even a secret, but it's this like, oof, this moment that I had where it's like, okay, I am not going to seek the biggest audience, because the biggest audience, at least in this country, does not look like me. I'm going to seek audiences that come to me and that resonate with me, that light me up too, because I'm bringing them a different contextually resonant version of the same story that other people have tried to tell. And so, yeah,
it sounds like we jumped all the way forward, and that's fine, but it sounds like you give people agency.
That's the whole thing.
Right? To be able to say, like, it's okay for my story to be at the forefront and to take center stage, which, I think I'm also a child of immigrants, right? That having a stage and being told that there is value in your story, even if it's not what has been the American story, is a wild thing. And I find it so interesting, especially now, because obviously we're in a state that's now where we're hearing about stories that we hadn't heard before in the political context.
Sure.
and folks are taking center stage, which we never.
Sure.
I imagine, my family is from Jamaica as well. And I also have Asian folks in my family from Jamaica.
Yep.
You would never have been able to think like, oh my gosh, the potential president, and hopefully
No,
by
of
the time it
course.
comes out, the actual president will have had this background because
Yep.
our stories have not been at the forefront.
Sure. And
Yeah.
I'll even take it a step further because you said it's okay. Like it's not only okay, it's necessary, right? And I'm gonna go deep, or actually, well, you decide if I think going deep or not. But listen, here's the deal.
Yeah.
Here's the deal, because we're all called minorities in this country, right? As if that's an identity, right? That's a noun. I like the word minoritized because then it's an action that was levied against us, right? And so we've been made to feel like a minority, right? In the context of Asian folks on this planet, we're like 60%. And so, and again, this is not to say like, oh, we're now the majority. That's not the point. But listen, like we don't have to go very far back, maybe 2 generations. Our grandparents collectively, no matter where you came from, went through some stuff.
Yep.
Right? A lot of stuff, right? Whether you immigrated here, whether you're refugees, whether your ancestors beyond that were slaves in this country, like we went through a lot of stuff for us to be here today. You got to honor that. How are you going to honor that? Are you going to honor that by being scared of what your manager is going to tell you? Are you going to honor that by, and again, I'm not minimizing security. I'm not minimizing financial security, importantly, and physical safety.
Yes.
But too many people who have that checked off still play small and refuse to own their own story because so many different reasons. So yeah.
Playing small. Yeah, I remember when I was growing up, my parents would be like chill out,
yeah, don't be
like,
extra.
Like chill out. And I know that came from a place of fear, right?
Love, but also love. Like, don't stand out.
Right. And
because in your culture and mine, if you stood out, you got whacked.
That was not right. That was not
right.
Okay. So sorry, y'all, but
no, but here's the thing, right? It's not, because, and again, I don't need not everybody listening is an entrepreneur. I get that.
Yes.
But you can take a little bit more ownership of your own career, right? You can take a little bit more ownership of your own families, in your own communities, and in whatever groups you belong to, because it's not for you and it's not for your ancestors even, but it's for the people that are coming after you, right? And so all this clicked for me, and I'm grateful that it clicked while I still had enough life to do this work. But so I'll pose a question to the audience, and if you're listening, you can nod along, right? Like, have you, because I have, and I'm sure Paula has, like, have you figured out some stuff in this life by yourself? Like, there was no rule book, there was no playbook, nobody pulled you aside and been like, hey, this is how this world works. Like, we had to go through some stuff. We have, right?
Yeah.
It sucked. It's painful, right? It's emotionally and physically and just mentally painful. So why would you want that? Why would you want somebody else to go through that? Especially people you care about, right?
Yeah.
Your kids, your nephews, your nieces, your cousins, your descendants. And so if you put that, to me, like, if we put that all together, like, you actually have a duty to get as loud as you can about all the stuff that you figured out.
Yes.
And you don't have any excuse anymore, because we have this thing called the internet, right?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, we have cell phones, we have stuff. We got AI now to assist with whatever mental blocks you got. Like, just shout it from the rooftops, because nothing, they say you can't take money to the grave. You can't take your ideas to the grave either.
I love that, what you just said, like a duty to get loud. Because all of us have a platform, whether we think of it as a big one or we all have a platform, and we're all influencers to someone, right? To somebody's. We influence what they know, what they care about based on who we are and how we have interacted with them. So I love that. We jumped all the way in. I have to ask you questions that I ask everybody. So I gotta run backwards. So, Jerry, do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
It's get loud.
Okay.
When I was younger, it used to be Hakuna Matata.
I love it.
and then I realized that, positive vibes only didn't really help. And so, I think it's understanding that, you almost have to, right? And so, I don't know the full stories of my grandparents, right? Particularly in our culture, you don't talk about stuff, right? And so out of my 4 grandparents, only one's alive, and 2 on my mom's side, like, we never really talk because age gap and cultural gap and all that stuff. But what I do know is that they risked their lives, literally, to save their country. They were all born into an occupied Korea by colonizers. So they fought for their country back. And then we were involved in a civil war, and they played critical roles, all of them, in helping build the Korea that we know today. The things that I'm going through are nothing. I'm scared of some person's opinion.
Yeah.
You know, throw anything at any of the things that I'm not trying to minimize people, so I get it. But listen, in the grand scheme of things.
Right. Their heart is not our heart. Right?
You know, there's
hard.
You know, when I was growing up, and many in the Korean culture, elders would tell you to eat a lot, right? And so when you're, you know, never leave food behind, always eat a lot, finish your meal, and let me feed you more. It's because they love you. It's because they also grew up with no food.
Right.
When you had food, you ate it.
Right.
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 And you know, they weren't allowed to have Korean names. They weren't allowed to speak the Korean language. But in an effort to quote unquote shield us from stuff, they did not tell us everything. Right. So now we have this unique opportunity where we have the ability to tell. Nobody can tell us no, right? We have this podcast, we have email, we have LinkedIn, we have anywhere. And we've seen some stupid people create some stupid content. So we know that there's no barrier to creating content. And like you said, everybody influences. Everybody has a platform. And therefore, everybody has, again, not a right, but a duty, in my opinion, to move your own family, your own community, even humanity forward by sharing stuff, right? Sharing all the lessons that you've learned, because what, you know, and again, this is, if you were taught or if you were raised with a scarcity mindset, like this is going to be a challenge, because it was a challenge for me to get through this stuff too. But like sharing stuff doesn't mean that you lose, right? Like this notion of, you know, you gotta hold everything close to your heart and not let anybody know anything, and everything's a secret. Like, you know, give it away. And I think sometimes people look at, you know, successful people who are generous, and they misassign or sort of misattribute, you know, the causation, which is, oh, they can be generous because they're successful now. And if you ask every single one of them, they're like, no, I am successful because I've been generous.
And right.
I've been giving away my secrets. I've been sharing. But how does this tie to personal brand? Like, give it away, right? Be a helpful person, you know, be the person that people come to for help, be the person that people want to hang out with. And, you know, sure, I think sometimes also we think of personal brand and we sort of overcomplicate it, where it's this like, you know, this pristine, manicured presence on the internet. Look, it's your reputation. It's as simple as that. What are people, when people hear Paula, what do they think about? When people hear Jerry, what do they think about? And what are they telling other people when you're not in the room?
Absolutely.
That's your personal brand.
Right.
And if you can tie a business to it, great. But if not, it's just what your reputation is.
What you were just saying helped me think about, you know, people talk a lot about authenticity. When it comes to your brand. And I remember somebody telling me, you know, like, you have to be very careful about pushing forward the fact that you're Black. And I was like, I don't think I can hide it. And moreover, I don't want to. And being authentic, and to your point of telling those stories. And when you were talking just now about being a helper and giving, I also thought to myself, and being the person that you needed that wasn't there for you, right? To sort of get away from the potholes that you had to go through. That is what, when I think about this, I'm like, I wish I knew these things. And so I want to tell people those things, because I don't want folks to have to figure this out again. And a lot of that is around branding, but it's just about, in general, I do think that when you have a giving spirit, it resonates more. And if that's who you are, it's even better. And I think it just should be who we are anyway.
Yeah, but of course.
I'm going to come back to one other question to ask you. Then we jump back in, because this one I want to delve deeper into. Do you have a hype song? So when they're going to get full Jerry up on the stage, what's playing in your head? Or if you're having a bad day, what are you using to kick it up? And it could be two songs or same song.
So listen, this is when the book cover doesn't match the content. I like an extremely wide array of music. I grew up listening, because my dad listened to a lot of oldies music. So I love Motown. I love oldies music.
Okay.
My wife is surprised every time I get in the car. Is like, how the hell do you know all the lyrics to every song? But you know, there's that. I also love 90s and early 2000s hip hop because
Absolutely.
I'm 41. I grew up with that.
I'm on exit.
Now we can't listen to any of that music. We're like two more people being canceled away from not listening to anything from that
The
decade.
mixtape is totally
Yeah,
messed.
we cannot listen to. We're losing everybody. They're all going down together.
We're gonna listen to jazz.
Yeah.
That's bad too. Anyway.
So like the song that I would listen to like in the car going to a job interview or whatever, I Feel Good by James Brown.
Okay.
It's loud. You know, there's some K-pop music from again, I might get canceled, but when K-pop was good, again from the same genre of the millennial era, you know, it's good, you know, and then music does have a way of, again, it's the personal brand. It's how you personify. I think in this era, music has become obviously a little too not only commercialized but too scripted to fit a trend or to make it sellable. And I understand the business needs for that. But yeah, any song that has to do with empowerment, you know, and then just self-love and all the wonderful things. But yeah, I'm a fan of all different types of music. And now I got kids, and so I got a whole new world of kid songs and all that stuff that lives in my brain.
My listeners know that I am a Prince fan through and through, and that I love asking this question because I think it does give me an insight into folks. But for me, it's always before I speak on the stage, before I do something it's always Prince, baby, I'm a star. Always,
Yeah.
always. Yes. But I also, speaking of hip hop, love I'm a Hustler. Right, with Lil J in there. Like, so I have a bunch of different things but Prince is my baseline. So you started talking about growing up in Korea. I want to talk about how you grew up, where you grew up, and then how that shaped you. You think so? You started getting into it, but tell me more.
So I was born in Korea in 1983. Younger of two sons. And grew up privileged. My father's a physician, and we grew up. Psy made it famous, but I was raised in Gangnam, which is a nicer part of Seoul. And then for reasons still, families don't really talk about some of these things, but we decided for one reason or another to sort of leave that behind and move to America when I was 8. My American immigration experience was also really, really interesting because we followed my mom's brother, my second uncle. So we moved to a city in Southern California called Fullerton. And
I went to Cal State Fullerton.
Oh, no way. Cool.
Yes,
Fullerton is the most Korean place outside of Korea.
Yes.
And so when you immigrate to Fullerton, you're not really immigrating to America in the traditional sense. Because even back in 1992, they sent letters home from the school district, English in the front, Korean in the back. And so, and then I had no sort of, acclimating challenges because I had my cousin in my class and there were enough kids in my class that spoke Korean. It was just sort of this really interesting melting pot of culture. And so I grew up in a very safe sort of, immigrant neighborhood. Although some of the things that I still vividly remember is that, because we were present from a population perspective, but our community was not present in the community. Right. And so we did Boy Scouts, and I don't remember having, troop leaders that looked like me. I did basketball and swimming and baseball as a kid. I don't remember seeing very many Korean coaches or Korean dads and look, I don't blame them. They were trying to survive. They were trying to figure this out. And so, those were seminal, sort of things. And, I look at teachers, I remember, everybody in the school district, the only Korean teachers we had were really like the ESL teachers, the language teachers, or like the one guidance counselor that they desperately hired to, try to communicate with all the Korean speaking parents. It's really, really interesting. Then we moved to New York City for my father's job. And so I went to high school in New York City, which was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because when you're a teenager in New York City, you learn to grow up. You learn to you learn to grow up. I am so grateful that I got to experience that because, Fullerton is one of these places that on paper is diverse, but you hang out in your own circles, right? And so, but in New York City, when you take the bus, when you take the subway, when you live life, you see and interact with everybody.
Yep.
Right. And it humbles you. It teaches you things. So I went to high school there. We came back to LA. I went to USC for undergrad. My family all moved back to LA right around that time. And so I've been mostly an LA person ever since, absent a few stints for grad school and stuff. But so, LA is home for me. Now we live, not where we grew up, but in an area that's a little bit more diverse. I coach my kids' sports things, not only because I want to, it's fun, not only because it's meaningful for my kid, but I do it for two additional reasons. And it's one, I want the other kids who look like my kids to look up and see a coach that looks like them, which I think is where most people stop. But I got to take it a little further, right? I need other non-Asian kids to see me as a mentor, a coach, a community leader. I need their parents to see me and people who look like me, not in the stereotyped way that their parents saw my parents. And so it is in my way. And I love, and then for parents who coach, it's so much time and it's a lot. But, for me, it's my way of activism too. It's my way of showing up so that, we're building relationships, right? Like, and I don't know, like I said, I grew up, Fullerton is one of the most Korean places in America. I did not have a single Korean sports coach growing up.
Yeah.
And I want to change that. Yeah.
And I love that. And I love that you're being thoughtful about the experience that you're giving your kids and everyone who is surrounding them, and also thinking about the experience that you didn't have, right? The direct contrast that you didn't have the folks in leadership that looked like you. And I always say shout out to parents who want to do extra stuff as a parent who does not.
It's a lot. I'm tired.
A total not.
I'm tired all the time.
But I also, again, thinking about Orange County and I moved there I'm a New Yorker, went to Massachusetts, met a guy, moved to California. We were probably the only two Black people there in Orange County. Like I would say, we looked in the mirror and be like, there's another one. We're like, oh wait, that's just us again. Yeah. And then coming back to New York City, which is where I live again now, it is so true that what I loved about the experience is that I got to meet people who are not like me, because to your point about getting on the subways and things, I didn't really have to do that. I could stay and be amongst people from the Caribbean and be fine. And then you get out and you realize, and that's why I love about the opportunity having lived in California, even though it was not the most diverse situation in terms of connectivity. But shout out to Cal State Fullerton, because that's where I got my degree. So we know a little bit about how you were raised and how that shaped you, but tell me about your career. What was your career?
My career, like I said, my father is a physician. So when you grow up in a Korean household, that's sort of not just the expectation, but I made it known pretty early to the dismay of my parents that I did not want to do anything related to that. And so, in undergrad, I pursued a business degree, and, at a time when most of my peers, and again, because in general, the sort of the narrative was like, pick something stable, pick something, dependable, and pick something where if you do X, you get Y, and it's repeatable, right? And so a lot of my peers went into, more safe things like accounting and the sciences. Maybe I was built different. I don't know. Looking back, everything makes sense. But, I met a professor who said, do sales, do marketing. Sales is one of those interesting things that a whole lot of people have opinions on whether you need to go to school, whether it's a
innate,
an honorable position, or things like that. And and then but I enjoyed it because it clicked for me early that it wasn't getting somebody to do something, but you were there to help somebody. Right? Sales to me is, you have a problem and I might have your solution. And if it is my solution that I think I can help you best with, I want you to work together with me on it. And it also means that if I am not your right solution, then I'm going to let you walk, and I'm actually going to help you find whatever it is or whoever it is that can help you, right? And so for the first 10 years of my, adult life, I sold really, really various things. From my first job was working for a big national home builder. And so I sold homes to active adults, we call them, but it was a 55 and older demographic in a place called Bakersfield, California, which is one of the not the most diverse place in California, let's call it. I sold condos in downtown LA. I did a whole bunch of stuff, sold mortgages, sort of stayed in the B2C sort of services world for the 10 years. The last thing I did in that chapter of my life was I sold insurance, auto and home insurance, which I'm really super grateful that I did, because that's started by my wife, which is a whole different story. But then I went to graduate school. So through that point, I think it was just the chase of things where I wanted to feel like I can fit into a system or fit into an organization where I could find success, whatever that meant. You know, most of the jobs that I had up until that point were commission only or some sort of, reward driven system.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what PTO was. You don't work, you don't sell, you don't earn, right? And
You
I
let
worked
you
a lot of
go.
weekends. Yeah, real estate weekends, all these different things. And so, in my 20s, I think I pursue this sort of validation of, that my career path was right. But what I also realized in hindsight was that even though I had jobs that didn't have a salary or a floor, I was also choosing to do things in an area where I had a ceiling.
Mm.
Right. And so again, looking to what I do now and what you do now, which is there is no ceiling because we work for ourselves. Hell, there's also no bottom. We can go, we have some terrible months. Um, but I was neither nor, right? Neither or. I wasn't doing something that would, build a trajectory driven salary path, nor was I doing something where I could make $1 million that year because the comp plan sort of capped what you could make. It was good, but it wasn't great. I had never had a traditional salary, position at the time. And so between that and again, having met my wife, who is much smarter than I am, had already gone to graduate school, the bug was planted that I too should pursue higher education. So went to Michigan to get my MBA, came out as a strategy consultant, did the travel bit for a couple years, did a few extra things. And then 5 years ago, in the shadows of me being fired, and then finally realizing, hey, maybe I am not meant to thrive in this system, or hey, maybe I am not even meant to survive in this system.
Mm.
Why don't I do the scariest thing that I've done, but the thing that makes me the most at ease, which is to anchor my story and to see if we can make something of me. My wife will tell you it was the dumbest thing that I could have done because we had 2 kids at the time and one was 6 months old. We live in California. We borrowed money to go to grad school. And so I was like, what the hell are you doing? Looking back, did it work? I think so. I'm not sure yet. We still got a long way to go. But I started this journey, Paula, 6 months before the pandemic hit.
Oh, wow.
And so the other side of the story is that, of course, I wasn't irresponsible. I was still trying to get a job and then try to, provide for my family. But everything stopped, right? In March and April of 2020, people stopped calling back. There was no jobs to be had. People were trying to figure stuff out. And
Yes.
while companies were trying to figure stuff out, they just said, don't let anybody else in. Right. And so, there was that. But, it was tough. The thing that I was stubborn on was that I could make a business out of sharing Asian American stories, mine included. How? I wasn't sure. And I think the Black community had similar parallels in the summer of 2020, especially. But we were busy taking care of each other, and it was sort of faux pas to be not even loud but vocal about building a business.
Yeah.
And it was and I'll say it now because it's been long enough. There was this sort of assumption of shame if you talked about money. And it was a lot of gaslighting of how dare you talk about money? We're trying to keep people alive. And I get that, right? Because so many of our communities were being wrongfully targeted and murdered and, attacked. And, and it was just sort of like, hey, all hands on deck. We need everybody, which I get,
Yeah.
But I built my business and podcast anchored in Asian American storytelling at a time where don't talk about money. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. We had stuff we need to pay for, right? And so,
Right.
and it wasn't until the following year in 2021, again, it's sort of in the shadows of some really ugliness, that the sort of the pivotal point in our community, especially for the Koreans, was the Atlanta murders. Those was March 16th, and seemingly overnight, all of corporate America wanted an Asian speaker to talk about what we were going through.
Yeah, and I think that's when I got reconnected.
Yeah, because this is sad, but I was one of a very few number of Asian Americans that were allowed on LinkedIn 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And there are a few of us more now, certainly not sufficient number. So if you're out there, please stay loud. But, so I got a ton of inbound. I got companies, schools saying hey, can you come help us with this? And so I got very busy, seemingly overnight. I did almost 40 gigs in a month,
Wow.
all virtual, right? This was 2021.
Yes.
I clocked in revenue just north of $100,000 that month.
Wow.
And I said, holy shit, it worked.
Right.
Which in hindsight, it's like, oh, it worked. But going into it, I was like, I have no idea if this is going to work or not. And so,
Wow.
and it validated, it felt icky, right? I was conflicted because like bad things led to this opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was, very committed to making sure that we would use this moment to have companies and schools stay dedicated and to normalize talking about our experiences and anchoring our stories, not just because something bad happened, but because it's something that we experience every day. And then we have been experiencing for a long time. And so that was sort of the, I had spoken before. I had, look, I sold stuff for 10 years. And in college, I was a tour guide. I did orientation. I ran student, like words, communication were always a part of who I was. It took me a really long time to unlearn a lot of the things that I was taught and conditioned to believe that my words were not worth material market value. And still I struggle with it, right? And I know a lot of speakers of color, a lot of entrepreneurs of color, we still struggle with value of saying the number and pressing send and negotiating against ourselves. But
it's true.
It's hard. But in that moment in 2021, I said, holy shit, it worked. And the game was, how do we sustain? Because let me tell you that the revenue was good in May, which is, Asian American Heritage Month. And then for the rest of the year, it was kind of flat.
You got
I was like, yo, I'm not Spirit Halloween, I'm not a seasonal business, but it certainly felt like a Christmas tree lot, right? Like revenue spikes in 1 month and then you go home for the rest of the year. And so, but I know that that's not something that only I experience. Black speakers are busier in February, and that's terrible.
100%. Yeah. Yes.
And so how do we normalize all of us encouraging each other and bringing each other along so that we can stay loud consistently? Because look, I need somebody to do maybe I need to stop saying I need other people. I want there to be research, and I'm happy to participate in it.
Yes.
That I think our communities face less discrimination, racism, all the things during our months because of the heightened awareness. And so it's ironic that we talk about all these things given our months because corporate America needs to check a box, but it is the time when we need it the least.
I wonder if that, I imagine.
I think people are more aware of like, maybe I shouldn't say that in the meeting.
I think that's right.
Or maybe I shouldn't ask Jerry to fix the projector because, you got to be nice to the Asians this month. Right. But in September or October, as we sit here, we go through stuff every day.
So maybe that's the lead up, right? Maybe
I want companies. Yeah. And so if you're
leading up to it, if you really truly want to be engaged and protective and supportive of and knowledgeable about, it can't just be in the
zigzag. Do a November Black History Month for no reason.
Right.
Do something for the LGBTQ community in January, right? Like, and again, like why?
Right.
I got so many thoughts on this. Like when as much as I appreciate these heritage months and these history months, it cements the narrative that we are not the mainstream. That we need an us month, right? And so if you're a corporate DEI leader, if you're, like the whole point of this is to normalize everything throughout the year, right? And so I enjoy being busy in May. It helps me take care of my family. It is a topic that I believe I am uniquely positioned to handle with care and then to help move organizations and people forward. But we need to talk about this stuff all year. And, that's sort of the personal brand. And so sort of to, where I am conflicted, and I'm sure other people are too, as a speaker who speaks on other topics too, is that when they see me, they go, let's book him for May.
Yes.
On the Asian American topic. And I say, listen, I can do a whole lot of other things. No. That's fine. We'll see you in May for the thing that we think that you fit the description for.
The irony of stereotyping for someone who's going to break stereotypes, hopefully, right? When they
know. But when it comes to personal brand, the reason why this has been something that's been, top of mind for me for a long time is how do you break through that? And it's not binary, right? Like I can't not be Asian.
Yeah.
Also, I'm never going to not talk about that.
Right.
Nor can
Right.
I talk about anything in life meaningful without my identity and my experiences and my perspectives infusing my
Right.
narrative?
Right.
But again, this is a challenge that many people have. That
Yeah.
how do I become known as somebody that's great at something
hmm
in addition to, at the same time, at the intersection of who I am?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's something that I've been, I don't say struggling with it. It has been an ongoing and active dialogue in my own head and with other people on,
Mhm.
I can't abandon everything that I truly care for.
Right.
But like, I'm really good at storytelling. Like, I'm
hmm
really good at personal branding. I'm
hmm
really good at like coaching other speakers to do what I do.
Yeah.
But it's also through the lens of me being me.
Yeah. My business tagline, right, is professional development through the lens of DEI. Like I'm always going to have that lens, but truthfully, when folks are like, "Oh, there's Paula, she's a DEI speaker," I'm like, actually not. Actually, my primary topic that I speak about is personal branding. Hence my podcast. Hence the things that I do that talk about personal brand. And so, but because I come at this intersection and in this color, folks are like, "Well, it has to be personal brand for the diversity retreat." I'm like,
I know.
no, it could be personal brand for everyone. So it's interesting that you bring this up because I talk about it in smaller groups, but I never really talk about it. But to your point about us getting loud, I think this is a good reason and way for us to be able to have people think differently about that expertise comes in all colors and in all experiences. It's not just expertise based on those colors or their ethnicities or their identities. It is expertise. And so if nothing else comes with it, but again, I think that a lot of things have come from this conversation. This is a takeaway that folks should really be thinking about because it's just true. We have to be more thoughtful about how we search for, engage,
Yeah.
and connect with people because I think that's how we move things forward, even more than the identity months, right? It is being like, hey, this speaker can talk about X thing at any point, and guess what? They don't look like the speakers we brought in all the other
Sure.
times because, whew, expertise comes in different shades.
But the thing is, which is, again, I want to scream into the dark void sometimes, but like, if you hire Paula for personal branding, you get the tactical personal branding,
Mhm.
and then you get the context
Mhm.
for free.
Yeah.
You get the additional perspective for free,
Yep.
right? And yet, it's frustrating sometimes to not have organizations see
Mhm.
that as an additional value,
Yeah.
and they see it as a detriment because, look, here's maybe this, people might be shocked for me to say this. If you think that given the opportunity
Mhm.
in a diverse room,
Mhm.
that I am going to go out of my way to only help people that look like me, that tells me how you would do
Right.
that in that situation. It's not about me.
Right.
Right. And so in corporate America,
Mhm.
and think about it, if you're a person of color in corporate America and you're in charge of promoting somebody, holy crap, you overthink this, right?
Yeah.
If I promote the black person, they're going to think I did it because he was black, but he's
Mhm.
really good.
Mhm.
Other people don't think that way, but this is another silent burden, right? And
Right.
so if you think that, or if you verbalize that, like, oh, you're going to play favorites or play nepotism, that means you're going to,
Right. Or that
but
it
you
would only
have been.
resonate or it would only resonate, which is just not true. Right? If you
Dude,
think
we
about-
went, right.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
we don't build the businesses that we've had if we don't, right? And
Mhm.
again, and what's, and then even if that wasn't true,
Right.
isn't it great that we can learn how other people experience life
Yes.
to build a
Yes.
little empathy? Like,
Yeah.
what, again, I
Yes.
look, I don't,
Cultural fluency.
again, this is my
Empathy.
little league example, right? I
Yeah.
don't do it for my people. I do it for other people so that
Yeah.
when they grow up, they'll be like, oh, I did have a Korean little league coach and he was dope. He
Yes.
taught me baseball, but he taught me some other stuff too.
Yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
like, and that's sort of, I think, what we need to be doing. And so, one of my favorite, I call her friend and a colleague in the business of speaking and all these things is Minda. Right.
Mm.
Minda wrote a book called The Memo, which
Yes.
is a specific book for Black women in corporate America. Listen, I am not a Black woman in corporate America. However, I read her book and I was like, there's so much I can resonate with.
It's
And
turning into a movie too. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Yes.
And look,
Yeah.
and the thing is also, people don't expect you and me to show up on a stage together.
Right.
People, they get confused. They're like, I
Can't
thought
wait
y'all
to a
are supposed to
fireside
like
chat.
each other, right? But like it makes me smarter. It makes me more empathetic, and it helps me understand that one, that we're not alone and that we're not here to fight against any other group for supremacy.
Right.
And two, I know it just humbles you, right? Like, holy, I had no idea. Like, again, I am one thing away, right? From being the most privileged in this country. And so I don't know what it means to be disabled in this country. I don't know what it means to be a gay man in this country. I don't.
Right.
So I have to learn that through the lens of other people. And to learn not, I need to learn it through their words. And so, when you write a book for LGBTQ leaders, like non-LGBTQ people should read it.
Yes.
Today, I don't know when this is going to air, but, today my friend Tiffany, she wrote a book called The Anti-Ableist Manifesto. She is a disability advocate, but the book is not written for her community. It's written for us. Right. It's how we can show up better for her community. Now, if people just, pigeonhole that book as, oh, that's for disabled people, then it doesn't get its job done.
Right. They already know. Like, we're trying
they experience it.
We're trying to expand.
Right. And so, that this whole notion of, I think, just this us showing up for each other and like being humble, and I think it's necessary. And, we touched upon it a little bit. The leading presidential candidate is both Asian and Black.
Yep.
Not either or.
Yep.
And the sum of her two parts don't equal 100. Yep. Right? She is both at the same time. And because she is both, she is now a new third person, which is she is her own new Black Indian American person.
Yeah.
And look at who your friends are marrying. Look at who you're marrying. Look at what your kids look like.
Yes.
How are you going to fight race wars when everybody is family with everybody? Right? And that's the
ship has sailed, literally.
That's gone, right? And so think about how we're going to teach Black history going forward. Think about how we're going to talk about the Asian American experience going forward. Right. It is blended, and it isn't us versus them. Right. And so for all the smart people out there who want to get ahead of trends or whatever, don't assume that the demographics are going to change, because the demographics are already here. Right. All you need to do is to ask your kids or your nephew or your nieces or your grandchildren, hey, tell me about your friends in class. Oh, yeah.
They will teach you.
They were already there, and they don't know.
Whether you want to know or not.
Right.
My kids are my best DEI teacher ever. It's like, we don't say that. And you learn so much.
You know what's scary too, Paul? Because my kids, my son's 7, and, he's learned about, Jackie Robinson, and he's learned about a lot of the things that are difficult topics.
Yeah.
And my wife and I have many conversations on how we want to respond to some of his questions so that we handle it together. Then we also have the sad realization that there are so many families in this country who will respond to the same question from their kids with so much hate.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is taught because their kids are coming to you with curiosity.
Yeah.
And you're responding with hate. And you're conditioning that, because what does a kid want? Yeah. A kid wants their parents' acceptance. Yep. And so you are, and again, it's very, very challenging. And so, all the things that I do and want to continue to do, which is to empower other people to own their own stories, is all intertwined for me, because I need everybody, not just the Asian folk. I need everybody to understand that their stories matter. And that their stories are not only matter, but they're valuable. And I also realize that because we live in, a little system of government called capitalism, that I need to be a success story from an objective financial lens for people to trust me when I say you should do this too. Yep. Because nobody likes somebody, and I get it. What authority do I have to tell somebody else to do what I did? If
it didn't work.
Yeah. Right. And you're still struggling.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's really interesting. But, I grew up with not seeing names that look like mine when I went to the bookstore. Certainly not in the leadership section, certainly not in the business section. Those things are changing. Right. And so how do we accelerate that change to make sure that everybody feels heard and seen? Right. Because what I'm advocating for isn't the minimization of anybody else's voice, but
Right.
it is the addition of other people's voices so that there's context in our advice.
Right.
This notion that one singular advice or framework or thought process can solve everybody's problems is quite lazy,
It's
and
wrong.
it's offensive.
Right. Right. Right.
You know,
Especially because of all the stories that we live with and the text, the sort of texture and context and all the things that are living there that can be valuable in our work and play and home spaces. I feel like if we're not asking for and tapping into these stories, we're losing out, right? It's
yeah,
not even just, those people who are teaching hate and are teaching their kids to separate, right, are basically making it that they're not able to navigate in the world that is going to come at them whether they want to or not. And so if you want to actually have your kids and you and your descendants be able to be in the space, you have to
yeah,
teach that the world is not just the single story that you have. And all of us, for the most part, even when we have what looks like a single story, we don't have one, right?
I
We have
know.
multiple things that are going on.
We're complex.
Very, very complex, very, very complex. I tell people all the time, as soon as I stepped foot in a boarding school, everything about the Black girl story that you knew changed because I went to
Yeah,
boarding school. Like there's privileges that happen with lots of different stages and experiences.
sure.
So I, of course, knew that this conversation was going to go quickly. I just didn't realize how quickly it was going to go. I want to ask you a couple questions before
Sure.
we jump up. One, just because I'm very nosy and I want to know, is this, what do you do for fun?
I'm a huge sports fan.
Mm-hmm.
I unfortunately I watch more than I participate. We're big Dodger fans here.
Okay.
We're Clipper fans, and
Okay.
I don't care what the other people say. We're Clipper fans. I happen to go to USC and Michigan, who are both big sports schools.
Yeah.
And in fact, USC played at Michigan 2 weeks ago, so we did a family trip out to Ann Arbor, which was a lot of
Nice.
fun.
Nice.
If I had more time, I would say reading. I love to read. I love to read. I love to listen to books. Just being curious, I think is a fun sport. The realities of being a solopreneur who travels often and with kids who have a lot of activities,
Mhm.
I don't get a lot of that me time per se.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
But it is and I think the hobbies change, right, a little bit as we grow a little older, with the different life stages. But no, we're prime baseball playoff season.
Yes.
Basketball's about to start in the thick of football season, so that's how we have some fun here.
Okay, love that. So I ask everybody who comes on my podcast two questions. One is this: what is one aspect about your personal brand that you will never compromise on?
Me being me. And and I say that with an asterisk, right? Like, I think it's authenticity is a really interesting word that I think has been overused at times and has been disingenuous in some regard.
Yes.
Look, if we were truly authentic, like, many of us would get canceled, right? Like, because there's rules, right? There's boundaries, and so my personal brand is therefore I try to live by three sort of related principles.
Mm-hmm.
Did I do right by my ancestors who gave me the opportunity to do what I do?
Mm-hmm.
Did I maximize the opportunity that I had? Am I doing the most with the opportunity that I have today?
Mm.
And when my grandkids think I was cool, right? Like, because we obsess so much, Paula, on being good descendants, right? We always talk about, like, our ancestors paved the way, and what are we doing with it? Like, part of it, like, let's stop living in the past a little bit, and then let's focus on, what do you want your grandkids to say about you? How did you F stuff up?
I love it.
Right? Like, or you're going to say, oh, like I got to middle management and I had a lot of PTO, and like, and again, those are things that are in the survival mode. But if you're listening to this podcast on the internet, we're okay. We're doing a lot better than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
And so go F some stuff up. Like,
I love that.
Like, what are they going to say? Like, yo, my grandmother, right? She built some stuff.
Yes.
Right. And I think we have to think about it in that context. I was listening to something yesterday. Robin Sharma is one of my favorite authors. If you haven't read Robin Sharma's books, you should. Super easy to listen to. But it's just this reality of a reminder that a few months after any of us dies, outside of your immediate circle of family,
I was thinking about it.
people forget you.
Yeah.
So then what the hell are you worried about?
Yeah.
The opinions of who?
Mm-hmm.
The people that talk shit today aren't going to show up to your funeral. They're certainly not going to pay your kids' bills.
That part. And also
They're not, right?
they're on the list. They can't come in.
Right. So then why are you worried? Why are we all worried?
Right.
Against the judgment of other people. And again, we have DNA inside of us that are meant to do great things. We have done great things with the DNA. We survived.
Yes.
Right. We built countries, we built stuff, and we survived people who try to overthrow us. And again, I understand times are tough. We're living in a divided world with a lot of stuff going on not just around the world, but climate change and elections, and it's heavy.
Yes, it is.
Heavy. But you still have agency to make it better, not just for yourself. And, I think we all have complicated relationships with money. And I have come to this point where money buys you access to do the things that you really want to do. Right. And so don't be ashamed of making money. Money used for good is better than no money at all. Right. And who said we can't have nice stuff? Right. Because we should enjoy that too. And so, I try to live at the intersection of all of that. I don't get it right most of the time. Oftentimes I'll get it right, or sometimes I'll get it right and feel really good. And hopefully, my legacy is that I help other people find their confidence and their empowerment to get loud. This doesn't make any sense if it stops with me, right? And so it's about growing the tent and bringing other people along, and to, making sure that everybody, can I don't know, just get a piece of the pie.
I think that's a perfect lead into my final question, which is your standing room only is a play. My branding room only is a play on the term standing room only. That I thought I was clever, and I am, and that's why my podcast is named that. And so, what is something that people would be standing room only in a room to experience about having to do with you? What's that special magic about you that we will be standing room only in the room for?
Look, I think that I exist, and it's a weird thing, but I have been fortunate to have spoken in front of audiences at organizations whose names that some of you might be impressed by. But what really moves me to tears and sort of keeps me going is when somebody sends me an email or somebody pulls me aside and says, "Hey, this is the first time I saw somebody that looks like me on a stage like this. And this is the first time we talked about being us in this organization. This is the first time that I saw myself at a conference." And so while we can celebrate those things, like it's all the emotions, it's humbling, it's sad, it's angering, but then it's also very empowering because there's no way in hell this is going to be the last one. So like, what's that door to open down? And, Vice President Harris said in an interview in May at the Apex event, you kick that mofo down, right? And you let everybody else in.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way this works. Representation only matters if it's the right representation. Right. And so we say that so much as if, a visible one of us solves all problems. It doesn't. And so, standing room only, and in a sort of a weird way, then why don't you give me a bigger room, man? If you give me a bigger room, we wouldn't be standing room only, right?
Oh, yes.
Why'd you limit my potential?
I love that.
Right. And so, and guess what, people? We live on the internet. You're listening to this on some sort of the internet.
Yes.
Ain't no capacity to a room on the internet. Right. So we have limitless potential to speak volumes. We've all cried reading a book. We've all cried listening to a podcast by ourselves in our homes. That person, this is sad, but stick through me. The person who wrote that book that you cried through has no idea who you are. Right? It's kind of sad, right? They don't know who you are, but they change your life. To flip it and think about the work that you can put into the universe, your words, your impact, your children, all the things that you put into the universe that will help somebody cry one day thinking about the impact that you brought to their lives. And you don't know who that person is today.
Yeah. Yes.
So massive volume is the only antidote. So you get loud. You don't know who's listening. I leave people with this. There's that phrase that dance like nobody is watching. I think it's wonderful, right? It's empowering to say, hey, be free of judgment and be yourself. But what if you dance as if everybody was watching? What if you dance as if the right person was watching?
Yes.
What if you were dancing as if you were the only person that could inspire somebody.
Yeah.
Because they look like you, they lived your life, you're mixing in things that only you can based on your experiences. And so while Dance Like Nobody Is Watching is empowering, but you have to assume that your stuff is good and that you have to understand and have the confidence to know that your stuff and your words and your impact not only can, but will change the world, and step into whatever it is that you're doing with the confidence to fully change somebody's world. And if you do everything you do knowing that you're going to change somebody's life, why wouldn't you get up out of bed every day? Right? Why wouldn't you do more of what you're doing? And it's hard. I suffer through it all the time. Self-doubt, minimization, imposter syndrome. I get it. But I have enough receipts. I have enough emails in my inbox. I know how people objectively feel. And it's not boasting if it's happened. Right?
Come on, Flex. I love that.
It's true.
Yes.
Look, I interviewed the Vice President of the United States of America, period. It's something that happened. I feel it, I felt very unsure about it because it's like, oh, am I bragging? I'm like, and my friends are always telling me, you did it. How many other people did it? I was like, I don't know. I was like, well, then just say it. Right. And so it's this thing. And so, your story is important. You need to say it. Not that you should, you have to say it. You owe it to yourself and to your ancestors. And God damn it, you owe it to your descendants to share it because you need them to remember you for something. And so get loud. I love the platform that you've built. I love you sharing all these things. And, and this platform is powerful, not because it's the biggest podcast in the world yet, but because it speaks to people that I can't communicate to. It speaks to people that Adam Grant can't reach, right? Because they look to you and they see themselves in you. And so, we all need to create these things that not only great at content, but, specifically at context. And so, Paul, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for being on the podcast. This is
so fun.
Awesome conversation. You have an open invite to come back whenever you want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And everybody go and tell somebody who needs to hear this because I feel inspired. I'm going to get louder and that's going to be real loud. So everybody, see you soon. Make sure you download, share, tell a friend because we out here winning with everyone. Bye, y'all.